Hello, everyone, and welcome to Real Estate Right Now, where real estate matters or matter to you. I'm here at the Linda Craft Studios live, right, part of Raleigh, North Carolina, is part of the Research Triangle Park. I will get this right. I promise you I will. I've been doing it now for several times. You'd think I'd get it right by now, right? It's Research Triangle Park. We are live at Linda Craft Studios. That's where we're at. I'm going to tell you something. Today's show is going to be a great show. If we talk a lot. We've talked a lot about it, the show, on the state of the affairs of what's going on in the real estate market, because there's been a lot of changes in the real estate market over the course of, matter of fact, the last couple of years since the pandemic. And then things seem to be changing all the time. And we're in the third quarter. And so we're going to talk about what's going on in the real estate market today. We're also going to talk about what's going on in mortgages, some things that you may not know about mortgages today. And we're going to have a special guest, Michael Martin. But my first guest is Tony Fink. He's no stranger to real estate right now, because Tony's been on the show. So, matter of fact, I looked. Tony,
this is like the 57th time.
Tony, I looked at all the pictures I have, and like, you're on the show a lot.
I know. I got to talk to my agent.
I am sorry. I just realized.
No, I'm glad you said that, Jay. And one of the things I love to do is I've had a lot of people in my career that have given to me knowledge or advice or experiences. So the opportunity to share that with the audience is wonderful.
Well, it's great to have you back. By the way, Tony is a listing specialist and buyer specialist at Linda Craft Team Realtors. And you've been doing this for...
I've been in real estate 35 plus years.
Right. And you were in the commercial side as well as the residential side.
Correct.
So you have a lot of knowledge. You've seen a lot of markets, and you've been through a lot of markets. I mean, in the course of 30 plus years, you've been in a ton of markets. We've been through kind of a bizarre market during the pandemic, and then things were starting to fluctuate a little bit in January in the first quarter. And then the second quarter, it seemed like we're stabilizing a little bit. What's going on here in the third quarter? Where are we at?
Well, I'm glad you asked, but also what I'd like to do is maybe use the context here of sharing perspective, right?
All right.
Because one of the things that's dangerous in any business is our muscle memory usually goes back to the last transaction. So a lot of people look at the market today and say, wow, it's so much more different than it was in the first part of this year or last year in 2021. Not taking into consideration that 2021 was an anomaly when you think about real estate and real estate trends. So I thought I would quote the State of the Union. And Jay, as they always say,
do we need to have some like sort of music? You know, dun, 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 dun,
sure,
dun, dun,
sure, why not?
State of the Union.
So the State of the Union is strong.
Okay.
All right.
What does that mean?
What that means is our market is stable.
Okay.
And I'm glad you asked.
Okay.
And in a healthy real estate market, there's usually equilibrium. And by that, I mean, there's a demand and a supply balance.
Okay.
And it may tip a little bit more supply or a little bit more demand, but not like 2021, where the demand, especially in this market, but caused by artificial influences, a pandemic, wait a minute, I don't have to go to the office every day. I can work from my house in my shorts.
Right. WFO, right?
Right. So sort of a changing cultural thing.
Right.
So that pulled forward a lot of demand.
Okay.
If that makes sense. So in other words, demand that should have happened in 2022, 2023, 2024 comes into 2021. So you asked a great question. Where are we today? So if I look at the first 3 months of the year, and I'm actually going to look down and look at some stats for you.
Okay.
So the first 3 months of the year, the the number of homes that were listed, over 80% were under contract.
Okay.
So what I do is I track certain markets as the first of every month, just to give me some directional idea of what's going on.
Okay.
If I look at it today and look at that same market on September 1st, it was less than 60%. So what that shows is either a slowing in buyer interest, which really isn't the case.
Okay.
It was an increasing in supply.
Okay. Now hold on here. Help me understand, because you said, because I think there's a perception here that would insist, no, the buyers have slowed down because of the interest rates.
So they have, but let's talk about it in relative terms.
Okay.
You ever ridden a motorcycle?
Yes.
You ever gone like more than 50 miles an hour on a motorcycle? Then you slow down to 20.
Yes.
Feels like you're not moving.
Yes.
You're still going 20 miles an hour.
Right. Which is
okay. So I'm trying to put it into perspective.
Oh, got it.
If you look at the pace of the market in 2021, the pace of the market in the first 3 months of this year, 2022,
Okay.
nationally, but certainly in the triangle market, it was super fast paced. It was 120 miles an hour on the motorcycle.
Got it.
When it probably should have been 50 miles an hour.
Got it.
So without using too many cliches. So what's going on now is it's a much more normal market. But what has happened? Well, there's been some sentiment shift. So buyers have gotten less scared of missing out and more scared of making a mistake. That's a natural state for a buyer.
Right.
Interest rates have gone up compared to what? Well, compared to 2021.
Right.
All right. So when you could borrow at 2.6%, 6.25% seems really expensive. It is comparatively.
But then, you go back in time. And when, I first got my real estate license, it was 7.5, maybe 7.75. Right. And then there was a time in the 80s, it was 18%.
Right. Right. I'm not that old as you, but, but my first mortgage was 7.5%.
Okay.
So if I say the interest rate today is 6.25%, and I compare that to 7.5%,
it's a great deal.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Right. So it's all what your frame of reference is. And what I try and counsel sellers or buyers on is understanding what your motivations are as you're going into it in the first place. And, if you're buying a home, you obviously have a need and a purpose. And what you really need to focus on at that point is affordability. Can you afford to make this purchase decision? The other thing, and I think I talk about this, and I think we may have talked about this last time, is can you afford not to make this decision? Okay. Because if you think of contrarian investing, which is something Warren Buffett does or other people do, is when everybody's doing something, you should do the opposite.
Right.
Okay. So there's just different ways to think about it. But the market right now, just to get back to the State of the Union, the market's very healthy. There's a fair balance between buyers and sellers. It's still a seller's market, which means there's more buyers than homes to be bought. But the balance of leverage between the two parties is pretty equal right now.
Okay.
And then it becomes a typical negotiation.
Right.
Who's a little bit more motivated? Is it the buyer or is it the seller? And one of the things I tell my selling clients is in a strong seller's market like 2021, you set a price and expect to negotiate up from it.
Right.
Okay. In a balanced market, you set a price and hope to get that price. In a buyer's market, which we're not in, but in a buyer's market, you set a price knowing you're going to negotiate down from it.
Right. And those were the days where we were saying things like, if you got 98% of your list value, you had a great, you actually were great.
Yeah. And that's not an abnormal market.
Right. So, okay. So I know, first of all, I want to tell everybody that Tony Fink does some great work, by the way. If you ever on LinkedIn, connect with him there, connect with him on Facebook. And I think there's several other channels, but those two in particular, you do an outstanding job letting people know what's going on with the market. And you actually had some statistics that were really interesting to me, that you were showing how the market went up and then it started in terms of, I guess, the median home price. Was that what it was? And we saw a little bit of a concession. Is that correct?
Yeah. So one of the markets I track is Wake County. Wake County, for other purposes, if you're not local, just consider it as the greater Raleigh market. It's a very large market, and typically whatever's going on in the major demographic area of any real estate market kind of sheds light on what's happening. And it's kind of like throwing a stone in a pond. The ripple is biggest in the center, but it gets wider as it goes out. So the fringe markets get hit, they get the benefit later and they get hit first. Okay. So again, this market's very healthy, but the median home price in July of this year, according to the Wake County Register of Deeds, actually went down just around $5,000 compared to July. Now that happened in August of last year as well, but it plateaued, stair-stepped, and then took off again.
Got it.
In this case, it seems to be holding. And what's happening is the price growth in homes. So when a house comes to market, listing agents, will do a lot of evaluation, but you're always trying to test, can you get just a little bit more? Can you
Right.
get just a little bit more? And right now that ability to get more is kind of flattened.
So when you see the median price drop a little bit,
Mhm.
what does that mean for buyers or for sellers?
On its face, it doesn't mean anything, right?
Okay. All right.
Compared to what?
Right. Okay.
So,
Okay. Right. Okay.
and that's why I always throw
Right.
perspective.
Right.
So the median home price, I think in July for Wake County was around 465,000.
Right.
Okay. That's up noticeably,
Right.
double digits from the
Right.
same
Yeah.
time a year ago.
Right.
So does that mean real estate's healthy or does that mean real estate's not healthy? It's a good question.
That's a great question. Yeah.
Right.
Right. Because I mean, you can argue both.
I would argue real estate's healthy.
And I would, but I could see you could argue the other side, but I would agree with you. That's healthy
Mhm.
because we're seeing equity being built and you're seeing good. But what is it when we see a little bit of a drop in the market, like we did see there? What does that really mean in terms of the reality for a buyer or for a seller? Or does it have any bearing on what a buyer or a seller does?
Well, yeah, it's a great question. And it will mean different things for a seller than for a buyer. So for a buyer right now, they can be a little more thoughtful.
Okay.
They have time to think through a
Mm.
decision.
Okay.
The house isn't going to sell in 10 seconds.
Right.
You know, I tell a lot of my listing clients that our normal market exposure, and again, these are using medians or averages or whatever, you know, you want to use. There's always outliers, but typically it could take up to 3 weeks and 3 weekends.
Mm.
And if we don't get market traction in 3 weeks or 3 weekends, then we kind of the market's telling us that we've missed something.
Okay.
Okay. Go back to 2021.
Yeah.
You had 3 seconds.
Right.
Literally.
Right. You had to make a decision now.
You had houses selling coming soon, which is a status that no longer exists in the same fashion as it did last year, where people bought homes without ever going in them.
Mm.
Now, agents who are good at what they do wrap their heads around that and figured out how to explain that to clients and how to think about it. And the easiest way to talk about it was, hey, it's like buying from a builder with blueprints, right?
Right.
The thing that was hard psychologically is, well, the asset's right there. Why can't I just go
Right.
through the door? But the thought process behind putting $500,000 down, you know, to buy a house
Right.
that you've never been in, and you got to make that decision and put non-refundable money up in this market before you ever go through the door. That took a lot of courage.
It did. So let me ask you this. Maybe this is a better way to ask this question. Are there some statistics? Because I know you're a stats guy.
I can be.
Well,
I'm an adjective guy.
Well,
But
I
we'll
know.
go
I
stats.
listen. I get the English major, but you got this number thing going on here. Your brain is so well balanced because your right brain, left brain thing. But are there statistics that would give us a better indication of where we're at than just the median?
I like the median,
Okay.
but when you're talking about an individual property,
Okay.
then you got to analyze the activity of the actual asset. How long has the property been on the market?
Mhm.
How many days? What is the price? One of the metrics I look at a lot, which I caution my clients not to focus on, is called price per square foot.
Right.
All right. And price per square foot is important because it plays into replacement cost new, which is an analytic that an appraisal will do. It's also, if you were building something, it's how builders think.
Right.
So, you know, by example, the median price per square foot was around $234 a square foot
Okay.
in Wake County
Okay.
in August. In August of 2021, the prior year, it was 196.
Oh,
So that's a 19% growth. And these numbers are from the Triangle Area Residential Realty. It's called the TAR report.
right.
So great stats. Now that's just Wake County, but again, I don't know if I'm answering your question.
Well, but I mean, there's a lot that goes into that because I mean,
Yes.
because the pricing of materials can increase,
Correct.
that can affect it. It's not just the market itself that's causing that shift up, right? Or is it all kind of? I guess it all kind of plays it.
Well, you asked median, so you can use averages,
Right.
right? So real estate agents will either quote average days on market or average market pricing, or they'll talk about median. I choose to use median as an English major,
Right.
or as a math guy, because it's not skewed by the outliers.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And a great analogy I read once was, if 10 people walk into Starbucks and one of them is Bill Gates, the average income level is off the charts.
Right.
The median income level is pretty normal.
Right. Okay.
So that's why I look at median, but there's no absolutes. So what you asked before is, how does a seller look at this market?
Yeah.
Okay. So with a seller right now, if you're going to put your house on the market, it's work. Okay. And if you are putting the house on the market, nobody really does it for sport. So you want to be serious about getting a contract and getting a contract that closes.
Right.
So what I guide a lot of my listing clients at this point is we go through the we go through the analytics of what's happened in the neighborhood, what's happened in the zip code, what's the competition look like right now. But I also give them a range. And I say, look, there's no perfect price for a house because it's part it's quantitative, it's math, but it's also part emotion. Buyer set pricing. So here's the range. Now, where do you want to fall in the range?
Right.
And if you want my guidance, I'll give you a number, but it's a collaborative effort. And, we want to pick a number that we know that's going to get market traction. People are going to want to see the house. So one of the things that's not positive right now, if you're listing a house as a seller, is to price it or overprice it because buyers are very informed. And given that there's more options for them, they will take their time to get around to seeing your house.
Right.
You don't want that to happen. You want them to see your house.
So yeah, this is one of the things I think in the State of the Union of the real estate market that has changed is that, when things were just flying off the market in seconds, and there were 40 people lined outside the door, which is not happening, typically now. One of the things we're seeing is that we're starting to see a little bit of seller concession.
Yeah, but it's a return to a healthy market. Okay. So it's a return to a 2018, a 2019. It's a market where there is leverage on both sides.
Okay.
The market in 2021 was pretty much unilaterally seller says.
Okay.
Whatever the seller wanted, the seller got.
Okay.
That's not a normal real estate market. That's not a normal negotiation.
Right.
So right now there's a give and take between concessions, between price, but sellers still ultimately have some control because they don't actually have to sell the house.
Right.
They can decide to take it off the market.
So okay, I know you did commercial investing, and what about investing in this market right now? Is there some cautionary tales, or is there some cautionary things that we need to be aware of? Because people are thinking, you know what, maybe this is a good time to invest in some residential real estate, and maybe as a rental or something like that. What are your thoughts in terms of this market?
I've got lots of thoughts on it. So I'll share and hopefully not be provocative, but if I am, shoot us some questions, let us know, because we want to answer your questions. So real estate investing is probably, in my opinion, the last asset class that somebody should invest in after their home.
Why?
Because it's not for the faint of heart. In real estate, over 35 years of my experience with it, needs cash at the worst possible time for the owner. Let me give you an example. If you and I had $500,000 and we buy stock, we put it to work. And if the stock goes down, we don't feel very good, but we don't have to put more money in. We don't have to feed it.
Right.
Okay. Let's say you and I put $500,000 into a house. We buy a rental property together and the tenant doesn't make a payment.
Right.
We still got to pay the mortgage.
Right.
We still got to pay the insurance. Still got to pay the utilities, still got to pay the lawn guy or the lawn girl, and it absorbs cash. And over my years of being a finance exec in commercial real estate, I've seen where that cash requirement, that cash call has destroyed people. Now, I don't want to be negative. I love real estate. And if you've got a primary residence, if you've got a stable, pot of cash on the side for the rainy day, if you've got retirement funds, if you've done all those things, then I think real estate is a great thing to consider. But then I throw my 10-mile rule, which is if you're going to start investing in residential real estate or commercial real estate as a normal human like you and me, stay within 10 miles of your primary house. You might want to ask me why.
Okay, why?
Because, Jay, that's the market And there's Peter Lynch, who was a great investor, who always said, buy what you know.
Right.
With real estate, it's even more important because instinctually you're going to know what's a good location. And the key to real estate is always location, location, location. The key to investing in real estate is you make all your money when you buy it. You don't make your money when you sell in commercial real estate or investing in real estate. You make it when you buy. And that's kind of an odd concept.
Yeah, that is an odd concept. I need some more explanation for that.
Well, it's because unlike a house, you can make money when you buy right on a house,
right,
or when you sell right.
Right.
Because in the meantime, you're living there.
Right.
Okay. And you got to have housing costs anyway. You've got to pay rent or you got to pay a mortgage.
Right.
Okay. The difference with investing in residential or investing in commercial is going back to it will need money at some point. If you and I buy an office building, typical mid-rise office building that's got a couple different tenants in it, average lease is going to be 5 years. That means 20% of the tenants roll over every year. The margin isn't that high in commercial real estate that you can cover a 20% loss of revenue for an extended period of time. So that's where some of the dynamics come in.
So I mean, but people are so interested in it and they want to do it. So is there anything good about investing in it? Is there some positives about investing?
Yeah. I'm not negative on it. I personally love real estate. And I've invested in real estate. I own homes. Some I consider investments. Some I consider, my primary residence or my vacation residence. Right. So there's a lot of positives into it. I just always caution people that tell me, hey, I'm a first time investor. I want to buy a property. Maybe I'm a little bit too negative with them just to make sure they think through all the risks, because it's not like buying a house, right?
Right.
It's not, when I say house, I mean your home.
Right.
It's got a different set of factors that come into play.
Right. So, I guess what I'm thinking here in terms of the investment piece of this is, I know that people want to do it, and I know that people enjoy doing it, and they've heard all the things, and we've had a show here on flipping houses and all those sort of things that people want to do to invest. I've had people, you've seen it too. People go, what about investing in land? Is that better to invest in land versus just, a fourplex or a duplex or a single family home or commercial piece of real estate? But I guess, what is it about people wanting to invest, do you think, in real estate over other investments? Because it's a popular.
Yeah. Well, I guess a lot of factors play into it. It's tangible.
Okay.
Right. I can get a stock certificate from my 401k and have this piece of paper. That's not as cool as, hey, I own that house. You see that front door? That's my house.
Got it.
That's part of it. There's obviously a psychology piece of it that relates to media. Right. There's lots of shows on flipping houses or owning houses. And it's glamorous. Right. But real estate as an investment class is what's called a fixed asset. It's a hard asset. Right. And it does have liquidity calls, which I talked about. It does have fluctuations in value that happen for artificial influences. So when you think of investing in commercial real estate, if we were going to buy an office building, one of the things that we would look at is what is the revenue minus expenses, but before we pay debt or taxes, income taxes. And that's a figure called net operating income. You divide that by the purchase price and it gives you something called a capitalization rate. Well, great. What do I do with that? Well, you got to compare that to what else you can invest in, right? And as the 10-year treasury goes up, right now it's 3.23%, where a year ago it was like 1.9%. So that means for that commercial real estate building that we bought a year ago to be worth the same today, we've had to have a growth in our NOI that made up for that differential, that loss of 120 basis points of spread. I know getting a little technical here.
And that's fine.
So here's the thought when you said, why is everybody into it? Everybody should have been into it in 2008 and 2009.
Right.
Could you imagine how much fun we would be having in addition to this podcast if we'd bought in every house we could find in 2008 and 2009?
Right. Oh yeah. Right. That'd been crazy.
Yeah. Or if we did it,
we wouldn't be doing.
Or if we did it a year ago,
we wouldn't be doing the show.
Yeah, we would, because we care. But it's hard to do real estate. So again, I want to make sure for the audience, I'm not negative on real estate. I think it's great. It's a great investment class. just take your time, learn about it first, meet with professionals.
Talk to you.
Talk to me. You can certainly talk to me. I'll share what I know about it and also ways to think about it.
But you'll help them find, I mean, if they really want to do this, you'll help them find investment real estate.
Correct. Yes.
Right. And because, I mean, you're a professional, you know this area.
Right.
Right. And a lot of people, you know, and I get it, you know, you should know what you know, but if you're a little bit skeptical, I mean, they should rely on your knowledge.
Well, and I'll say one of the reasons I'm being a little more cautious right now is if you and I wanted to go buy a house down the street, we're going to be competing with people that want to buy that house to live in.
Oh, right.
Well, we're not going to live in it.
Right.
So they can afford to pay a little bit more than we can pay. So that means your cushion or your, you know, the amount you got to pay goes up a little bit more if you truly want to buy that house. Right. So typically when you buy a single property residential for investment purposes, if you can get your rent check to cover your expenses and your mortgage, you're doing great.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's not positive cash flow.
Right.
That's neutral cash flow.
Right.
And then what you're betting on is appreciation. So the second part of my caution right now is pre-pandemic, our appreciation rate was about 6.3% a year for 5 years in a row, 2014 to 2019. But right now, your mortgage rate on an investment property is probably north of 6.3%.
Got it.
So now you're upside down a little bit.
Right. Got it.
Okay. So it's not as easy right now as it was a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago.
Okay. Is there a question I should have asked that I didn't have on the, that I didn't ask you on the docket?
I don't know how much time has gone by. Wow.
A
lot already.
Yeah, we've just got fast.
I would say let's throw a question out to the audience.
Okay.
Send us your questions so that the next time Jay invites me back, we'll address your specific questions and answer them. But no, I don't think you've missed on anything. You know, I'm as rah as anything, but when it comes to investing, when you buy real estate, it's not like buying a stock.
Right.
Again, you and I could buy a stock today, decide tomorrow we made a mistake and there's liquidity and we sell it.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
We take our loss. It is what it is.
That's awesome.
Okay. When you buy real estate, it doesn't sell in a nanosecond.
Right. Got it.
Okay.
You've been great.
Well, let me go get the finance guy.
Tell people
the money man.
No, well, tell how people get a hold of you.
Well, okay. You can reach me at lindacraft.com. My email is tony@lindacraft.com. But more importantly, you can reach me at 919-986-4146. If you're on Facebook, if you're on Instagram, if you're on LinkedIn, send me a friend request because as Jay loves, I do the Monday motivation. I try and make them interesting.
Wednesday.
And I do the Think Funny on Wednesday. And there's two things, Jay, that you get when you're a dad.
What's that?
Which I'm proud to be.
What's that?
A dad bod and dad jokes. You're licensed for both.
And he also will do updates on the market as it goes along. So check him out. Tony, thanks a lot for coming.
My pleasure, Jay. Thanks for the invite. And I'm going to grab Michael for you.
Absolutely. It's Tony Fink with Linda Craft Team Realtors. Tony, of course, was a commercial real estate broker and then big real estate broker. And then, of course, now does residential. But he's off. My next guest, I sometimes, people go, my next guest doesn't need any introduction, but I'm going to introduce him anyway. His name is Michael Martin. Michael's with Fairway. Actually, what I read about you, and I didn't know this, there is a term for it. You are actually like an active branch manager. So you're like
producing branch
producing
right.
Branch manager, right?
Yeah.
So that's what you do. So how long have you been doing mortgage lending now?
Jay, first of all, thank you so much for having me. Very excited to be here. I got in the mortgage business in January of 2002. So about 20 years and about a little over 20 and a half years. Yeah.
So you're 12.
Yeah. Something like that.
Yeah. Wow. you don't age.
Yeah.
Since the day I met you, you've never aged.
My wife would say I'm pickled. It works out.
So Tony has been talking about the market, and we, when we were in the pandemic, things were just going off the market fast.
Yeah.
And then now in the last 3 quarters, we're in the third quarter here of the year. We've started to see some things change from January and then now to the middle until now. What is your perspective on what you're seeing in the market? How would you describe the market today?
Yeah, Jay, it's very interesting when we look at what we've all done as a mortgage company, right? We've all these mortgage companies and teams
Right.
have had to hire over the last two years, 2.5 years to keep up with the potential volume, whether it was refinance or even the purchase volume. And so that's certainly been, interesting in itself, trying to hire. In fact, we were hiring people. You try to hire people that are experienced, and all of a sudden, it was tough to do that because there was so much competition for it. So we hired a lot of people that didn't have experience and taught them the business. The reality right now is that the market is shrinking, right? Mortgage companies, unfortunately, are laying people off because the reality is you cannot keep the volume. When the volume's down, you can't keep all these folks.
Right.
So we're certainly seeing a major switch in the market. There's no question about it. The reality is people are freaking out because interest rates went from 3% when they started qualifying in January, February to 6%. We got down to about 5.5%, or maybe even in the high fours for a little while, but now we've kind of pushed back up into that 6% range, which is just causing people to take a little bit of pause. They're going, when you throw that with the super high prices that have gone up, it's causing people to just take a minute. I think there's two things that are going to need to happen, Jay. One is people will get used. The reality is the average 30-year fixed mortgage rate for the last 50 years is 7.4%. We're not even close to that, right?
Right.
We all got spoiled with 3% money, 2.5% money. And the reality is, we can't, it's not sustainable at all. It's not good. It means certainly nice to have a low interest rate. I appreciate my mortgage rate that I've got right now.
Right. Yeah. We all do. Right. Right.
But outside of that, and the business it brings is nice as well, but it's just not sustainable. Just like the home prices going up as quickly as they did.
Yeah. Well, Tony and I were talking about, I remember, buying a house. We were buying a house, and I think the interest rate, when we were buying a house, was 7.5.
Yep.
Right. And we didn't blink an eye. We thought it was great. And
sure.
And in Linda's perspective, she came into the market when interest rates were 18%, right? When she was doing this, right? So, I mean, when you start thinking about it and start putting it in perspective, we've been pretty spoiled.
Oh yeah, no doubt. Most of my career, frankly, when I first got in the business in January, I didn't close my first loan until February. And that rate was 7.125. I remember the client very specifically, VA loan purchase, and it was 7.125%. And he was thrilled. His family were, and he were thrilled to get that rate. And in 2003, rates came down from the 7s to the 6s, and then we just refinanced everybody we did a loan for the year before. And the values were going up, not like they have the last several years, but there was a lot of people also that had a lot of equity in their homes. And it's something that similarly is happening right now, but it's different in the refinance world. Most people don't want to get out of a 3% rate or 3.5% rate to go to a 5 or 6% rate. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense, right? But people that have a lot of equity in their home, but also somehow have a lot of debt for various reasons, actually from a cash flow perspective, there's a real benefit in refinancing, doing a cash out refinance and paying off all of this debt that they've somehow accumulated. Now, if we can convince them to not go back into more debt, right? And that's going back to my first couple of years, we'd refinance, folks, it's from 7 to 6 and then from 6 to 5, but their balance kept going up because they just kept paying off, this debt that they kept reoccurring. And we'd have these tough conversations. Okay, let's rip up these credit cards. Let's, let's not continue to increase that debt.
So we're going to talk about 3 R's.
Okay.
Today, right? We're going to talk about refinancing, recasting, and reverse mortgages.
Excellent.
All right. So you've already jumped on the refinancing. Let's talk a little about refinancing. When is an appropriate time to refinance, or is there? I mean, there's a better time than others, I'm sure.
Sure.
And when do you want to do that? And when is it right? And maybe when is it wrong?
Yeah. So at the end of the day, everybody's circumstance is different, right? We've got a couple of refinances we're doing right this minute. Well, in the last month or two, we were doing some refinances for folks that are unfortunately going through a divorce, right? They don't have an option. They've got to refinance to get the house out of their spouse's name, and in many cases to pay off the portion of equity. One thing, by the way, a lot of people don't realize this is in mortgage lending, when you're doing a refinance and it's for a separation or divorce, if you're paying out the equity to the other spouse, it's actually not a cash out refinance. It's still a rate term refinance. So it gives you a little bit better terms and higher loan to value ratio. So you can go significantly higher on a loan to value ratio with a rate term versus a cash out. Maximum is 80% on a cash out. So people can get a little bit more equity out if necessary. But the other times that people refinance naturally when rates drop, right? When we're at 5 and they drop to 3, people are refinancing to save interest and cash and their cash flow. And another reason to refinance, right, is frankly to get some cash out to do a project on your home. Now, sometimes you may want to get an equity line. So right now, if people come to me and say, "Hey, Michael, I'm thinking about putting a pool or doing an addition," I'm going to ask them a few other questions like, "How soon do you think you can pay this off?" Because I don't want to get rid of your $300,000 loan at 3%. To go significantly higher if it doesn't make sense. Now, again, you have to understand everybody's circumstance. If they're getting $50,000, maybe they can pay that off in 3 years. Great. Let's do that as an equity line instead of adding and changing their interest rate to the whole loan.
Okay. So maybe the thought process here is then, all right, something for the audience to think about is, okay, don't worry about refinancing. Take a look and see if you know what your equity is and try to get an equity line on that, because what is the equity interest rates any different than what we're seeing?
Yeah, so they're going to be variable, right? An equity line, or you've heard of HELOC or a home equity line of credit. It's typically going to be variable. You typically have to go to a bank. We don't offer these loans, so we refer folks to some folks we know and trust to do a great job. And again, it's going to be variable based on prime. So it may be prime minus a half, prime plus 0, or prime plus 1 or 2, depending on the credit and the loan to value ratio.
So it's a better deal.
In many cases. But again, prime is higher. You start adding to prime, it gets a little higher, especially as we've started to see. And I don't know if Tony talked about this earlier or not, but Fed's meeting again here later this month, and they basically announced that they're going to be raising another 0.75 point. Now that's the Fed funds rate. Now we're changing subject here, so I'll be careful.
No, that's fine.
But that's the Fed funds rate that they control, not mortgage rates. And
so why? Okay, but people confuse this
all the time.
Help us understand that, if you don't mind.
Yeah. So the rate that there's a lot of dials that the Fed has, right? You may have heard them doing quantitative easing in the past, right? Where they go out and buy mortgage-backed securities and they are then purchasing these things, which causes demand. That's exactly what happened in 2020. When the world went crazy in March of 2020, the government made a commitment to buying mortgage-backed securities. So they created a demand for these bonds that there. And so when there's this demand for bonds, and it keeps the price of the bond high, which kept interest rates very low. And that is something that the Fed has a lot of control over. And the more they buy, then the greater the demand, and then the higher the price, and then again, lower the interest rates. And that fed this economy for 2 years, right? Because it was causing this money to be very cheap, maybe cause people, millennials especially, got finally off the fence, out of their parents' houses or apartments, and start buying houses for themselves. Because we wondered when they were going to be buying homes, because we expected them to really pull us out of the 2012, 13, 14 stuff, from the previous recession in 08 through 010 or 2010. But they didn't. They stayed either in their parents' houses or renting with other friends. And then finally, when rates got so low, they started buying in droves. So that created another demand there. Now, interest rates stayed low specifically because the Fed continued to buy these mortgage-backed securities, hundreds of millions a month. And they finally, towards the end of last year, said, okay, inflation's starting to get a little crazy. And we hadn't seen the real inflation numbers yet, but they knew it was finally coming. So that's when they said, we're going to taper this purchasing of mortgage-backed securities. So they slowed it rather than just quitting it. Right? They have a couple different options. One, they can continue to buy. Two, they can slow their purchases. Three is not do anything at all. And then fourth, and that's kind of where we are now. They're not buying any, they're not selling any. The fourth would be actually the selling of these mortgage bonds, right? Instead of purchasing. That would cause a major, major problem, because again, just like purchasing causes the price to go up, selling will cause that price to go down, which would cause interest rates to rise even more. So they're really just kind of, and these loans get paid off naturally anyway. The bonds get paid off naturally because people sell a house and move, and then that loan gets paid off, right? So that happens naturally anyway. So they're just letting those kind of settle, and then they'll eventually get paid off one way or the other. But that's what's causing interest rates to go down. And then when they said they were not going to be buying mortgage-backed securities, and they slowed that down, then we saw those bond prices go down, which causes interest rates to go up. So the Fed, let me go back there real quickly. So they control also the Fed funds rate. Now that's the rate at which banks lend each other money overnight. So Bank of America will actually borrow money from Wells Fargo and vice versa, depending on the deposits and withdrawals that they have in their accounts every day. And the Fed controls the rate at which those banks lend each other money. Now there's other things like prime rate that's associated with the Fed funds rate. So prime rate is Fed funds rate +3. That's exactly what prime rate is always.
So it's always that. Prime rate.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So you'll see those move. And again, a lot of things are attached to prime rate, like credit cards, home equity lines of credit. Right. Sometimes car loans can be affected that. So some shorter term or variable loans are always going to be kind of attached to that, so that they'll move up and down with the economy as the economy's moving up and down.
So, all right. So I don't know if I got it all. So because we attach every time we go, oh no, the Fed's going to raise the rate. Here goes my interest rates. I better buy a house now.
Yeah.
But it doesn't, I guess what is it that makes it work where it goes, okay, that I can count on an interest rate raise, or is it going to happen eventually because they raise the rate?
Yeah. So it's a really good question. Interestingly enough, the last 2 times the Fed has raised the rates by 3/4 of a point, mortgage bonds actually went up, which means rates actually dropped. Now you would go, why in the world did that happen?
Why? Yeah.
Here's why. So mortgage bonds, right? When you are an investor in a mortgage bond,
right.
and if you've got a 401k, you more than likely have some bonds in your portfolio. And a mortgage bond is a fixed rate of return, right? You're going to get a 3.5. So I think we're back now to the 5% coupon is where what we're following now, which means you're going to get 5% rate of return on that mortgage bond. Now, if interest rates, if inflation is at where we had 9.1% or something recently,
crazy.
If inflation is at 9.5%, and you're getting a fixed rate of return of 5%, let's just say 9, right? So you have a 4% loss, if I can do my fingers right, 4% loss by actually getting a gain of 5%, you're still losing 4% because of inflation, right?
Right.
So inflation, you will always see mortgage rates follow inflation. So I actually thought we'd have rates higher than we actually had them earlier, because inflation was getting near 10%. We started to get inflation at 10%. I mean, interest rates have to go that way. Now, the Fed will then, so they've clearly said, okay, inflation's getting nuts. So they're now attacking, and have been for the last, 3 months, 4 months, attacking inflation. So that's why they're raising rates.
Right.
When you make things cost more money, people will spend less. Simple enough, right?
Right.
So as the price of things, of the borrowing money goes up, then people will spend less. And the Fed has basically said, we want to push this. We want to push this economy. Like, we got to slow it down because the inflation is just too hot. So by raising rates each time, now they don't want to raise it 5% at one time because it will be a screeching halt.
Right.
So they're doing 3/4, and they did 3/4. Or more than likely, they've kind of already leaked it, and that later this month it's going to be another 3/4 of a point hike. Interesting enough, you could potentially see that cause a short term. Both times they did the Fed, they raised the rates recently. The rates went down. They've worked their way back up. Unfortunately, today numbers came out regarding inflation. So CPI, Consumer Price Index, comes out once a month. That came out this morning. Inflation went from expectations we were at 8.5 last month. The expectations were 8.1. It actually was 8.3. So it's still moving in the right direction, but not quite where the expectations were. So unfortunately, it was bad for bonds. Rates went up today, probably about 1/4 of a point, somewhere in between 1/8 and 1/4. And that's a pretty big jump in one day.
Yeah, that is a big jump.
Yeah. So again, as the Fed continues to attack inflation, slowing the economy down, you'll start to see interest rates fall back, come back once that inflation starts coming down. You typically are going to have interest rates higher than inflation, not lower. Right now, interest rates are actually a little lower than inflation.
Interesting. Okay. So now I wrote about that. We're going to talk about some terms. Refinancing was one of them. But there's another term that I don't think people are really familiar with. It's called recasting.
Yeah.
Help the naive person out there.
Sure.
I'm not naive, but person who just doesn't know, what is recasting?
Yeah. So recasting, it's something we've been talking about a lot over the last couple of years. And the main reason is, people will need to sell a house in order to purchase a home, or maybe they don't need to, but they really want to take the equity from their current home and put that towards their next home when they go buy it. But getting a house under contract when you were contingent in the last 1.5 to 2 years is darn near impossible, right? I mean, they're not going to wait for another house. So when you got 50 offers on the property, So what people might have is 5 or 10% down in cash, be able to go ahead and buy them as long as they have the income to qualify for both mortgages, right? And then once they sell their house later, they've already bought into their new home, and then they sell their home. At that point, once they sell that house, they can take that equity, apply either all of it or a portion of it towards their new mortgage, And if they just write a check, what'll happen is it just comes and makes the term of their loan way shorter. They keep the same payments.
Right.
But a recast for usually either $0 or $300 nominal fee, you just have to make sure you reach out to your servicer to do that. We help our clients do that after closing. But a recast will basically keep the term the same and bring that principal and interest payment way down, or equivalently based on the amount that they have. So usually they have to put at least like $30,000 towards that. Every servicer is a little bit different. Usually it's somewhere around $30,000 of equity from the previous owner or wherever the money's coming from into that. And then they'll recast keeping the term. So if it was a 30-year loan, it was going to be fixed 30 years from closed 30 years from now, it would still stay that, but your principal and interest payment goes down because you're only going to pay interest each month based on your principal balance.
So in this case, and when we recast, if you can recast, what you're doing is it kind of like a way of preventing you from getting a higher interest rate later, or?
It's not necessarily changing the interest rate, right? So where you would want to refinance is if rates had dropped by the time. So let's say you sold your house next year and rates are a point lower. You probably wouldn't want to do the recast then. At that point, you'd go ahead and do a refinance and just get a lower loan out and bring some cash to closing. But if you had, let's say you bought your house and a year ago and the rate was 3%, you don't necessarily want to go refinance now and go to 5% just because you got a large chunk of money. So the recast would allow you to put that chunk down and then bring that principal and interest down.
I guess that's what I'm saying is you get to recast with that 3%.
Yeah, you keep the exact same loan. They just change the term. There's no new loan at all.
Got it. So the advantage there is if you can shoot, if you've got a 3%, loan, why not recast? Yeah, and when you go into your next house, right? Because then you would be able to keep that 3%.
Potentially. Now it all depends on your needs, right? If you're in your 60s and you're either headed towards retirement or in retirement, then I think a recast, and this may go into your next R, but a recast may be the right thing to do because you want to get your fixed payments lower, right? You want to really get those things down from a budgeting standpoint. If you're not in your near your retirement age, you're going to be working for 10, 20 years or more. Honestly, you may be better off taking that money and putting into the market, whether it's buying investment property or so you've got some more, additional properties that you're going to be able to have appreciation on and growth on, or putting it somewhere in the market. I mean, the S&P right on average is well over 8% in any given 30-year period.
Right.
Would you rather save 3%? Because that's what you're doing. The good news is when you pay off a loan that's 3% or pay down a loan, you've saved yourself automatically 3%, right? So you're getting a return on that because that's what it would have cost you.
Right.
But would you be better off taking that money and having somebody that knows how to manage it for you, put that in a place where you could get 8+% over time? Right. Would you rather save 3% or make 8%?
Well, of course, right. Make your 8%. Right.
Again, it depends on your time in life. If your income is going to be going down, you're heading toward retirement, you really want to be in a more safe place. You don't want that money, fluctuating as much. There's people that are headed to retirement last year or this year, and their money's down 20% this year. That's really hurting. But as long as they're not pulling it all out, it's going to continue to grow for them.
Right. Okay. So there's the third R.
Yep.
Okay. Listen, I've been around, and this has been around forever, as long as I can remember. There's always this famous actor person who no longer is relevant. Okay.
Not so much anymore. Although to his clientele, maybe so.
But to his clientele, he might be relevant. But I mean, I'm going back. I can go back and remember Ed McMahon, right? When there was no Johnny Carson show, or when he retired, right? I can remember who was Fonzie, the guy who played Fonzie, Henry Winkler,
yeah.
Right. And he did this. And now we have, I love the show. I love Magnum PI, but Tom Selleck is now out there and he is promoting reverse mortgages.
Yep.
All right. Now I got to know, okay, because is that, okay. Because, what they're doing is they're telling people, oh, this is a great idea for you to do reverse mortgage. And there's a part of me that goes, no, don't do it. Okay, what is the truth about what is it? Help other people understand what a reverse mortgage is, and then what is the truth?
Yeah, so I'll tell you, it's a very controversial subject because there are people that think it's an absolute ripoff. And to be very frank with you, I was one of those people for a long time.
Okay,
I am not at all anymore. I really truly believe it's a great product for the right person, which I think is a lot more people than people realize. I think, it used to be what's considered the loan of last resort. Right. Because that's really the way it was reverse mortgage was looked at. Like somebody who doesn't have any money, who doesn't have, but they want to keep their house.
Right.
There's a lot of negative stigma about a reverse mortgage. That's just not true. Now, at one point, some of it was, but the government changed a lot of rules. I believe it's 2017 or 18. They changed a lot of rules to protect the senior for reverse mortgages, so they'd really understand. One of those, and I'll just bring out some of these kind of. First of all, you have to be 62 to qualify, right?
Okay.
So you cannot get a reverse mortgage if you're less than 62.
Okay.
It's a government requirement. Now, on a reverse mortgage, now it's not true that the oldest person on the application or on the deed has to be 62. So a 62-year-old, male or female, could be married to a much younger person, and who's 30. Right. That could happen.
That happens.
And you could still get a reverse mortgage on that deal. Now, your required amount of equity is going to be significantly greater, right? Because they have to predict. The one thing about a reverse mortgage is if you don't make if you don't make interest payments, your balance will go up, right? That's the whole reverse mortgage is that it goes up, not goes down. So let's just jump into some of these kind of, I think, things that people believe that maybe aren't necessarily true. Now, I like to start off with the negative first, because I think the reality is there's some definite negative things about reverse mortgage. The costs are greater. Okay. Without a doubt, the costs of a reverse mortgage are going to be more expensive than a traditional mortgage. Interest rates are generally variable, not fixed. Okay. Now that scares a lot of people too. Variable rates scare people. The reality is they're not always bad. Guess what? They always just think they're going to go up. They also come down. Right. So there's a lot of benefit. It can actually happen to that. There's a stigma that says that usually it's the kids, right, that think that they're going to be stuck with this mortgage. They want their parents' house, or the parents think that their kids want their house. Let's be real, like very few people, unless your parents have a house on the coast, on the beach, or in the mountains or something like that. The kids don't want your house. They want the cash. Right? They want the equity. Right? That's just the reality of it. Right. I mean, most kids don't want their parents' house. They already either have their own house. Right. But they sure love that equity. And they think that they're going to be robbed of that equity. If their parents get a reverse mortgage. That may or may not be true. The reality is the parents have some sort of ability for retirement, Social Security. Maybe they've got a retirement like pension or 401ks. And then they've got equity. A lot of these people have this equity built into their home. A lot of these seniors have a house paid for, right? And you're like, why do I need to have a mortgage? Well, how much cash do they have available, right? For life, right? And if you're in your 60s, 70s, and you don't have a whole lot of cash, but you do have a lot of equity in a home, do you want to pinch pennies for the rest of your life and be miserable, right? Because you're probably not going to get a job if you're in your 70s and 80s, right? Or do you want to be able to live your life and utilize equity? Now, some kids might say, well, I don't really care. I just don't want them to spend my money, my inheritance, right? I mean, that's a fact. There's
that's a reality.
But the reality is, like, most kids would really prefer their parents live out their years. And the kids aren't owed anything at this point, right? They've done whatever they've done to get there. So this allows a senior to either have, and you can do a couple different things. One, the first thing is you just have no mortgage. Okay. So that's one of the major benefits of reverse mortgage. You have no principal and interest payment at all. Now, you are still responsible for taxes and insurance each year. So one of the qualifications, there's not really a lot of income qualifiers. There's an asset/income qualifier that says we need to know that you can actually make your taxes, because what we don't want is liens being placed on the property for somebody not paying their taxes and insurance each year. In fact, if we can't see that they have that, there's actually something that requires that we actually hold some, kind of like an escrow account, so that they have enough funds to be able to pay those for a certain number of years.
Got it.
And it usually has to do with some credit issues or income and that lack of assets. But most of the time that's not needed. The other part is you can actually utilize it for income. So you can get a check from your mortgage every month to go to pay your other bills, right? Well, let's say you have a $500,000 house and your mortgage is paid off, but you have just Social Security. So you're getting $1,500 a month, or maybe $3,000 a month between the two of them. That's not a whole lot of money to live off of, right? And you still got to pay your taxes on your property and your insurance. What if you want to do some traveling, right? So you can actually get a check from your mortgage. They can set it where it's the same amount every month, almost like an annuity type thing. Or you can make it where you can make withdrawals. Like there's an equity line of credit built in, so you can actually pull it as you need it, and you don't necessarily have to get it each unless you want it.
How about that?
So there's a lot of real benefits to this. Again, the overall costs from closing costs are definitely a little bit higher, but it does so much more for that senior. There's another really big thing that's important to note, and I'm not a CPA, so I can't give tax advice, but if there's one of the rules that's changed is if you use a home for, well, you can, by the way, a lot of people don't realize this, you can use a reverse mortgage to buy a house. So you don't just have to refinance the one you're in now. So if, let's say you've got a home right now that you own and you want to go buy another home, sell this one eventually, you can utilize a reverse mortgage for purchase for that property. And then you have another whole tax benefits. Again, this is where you got to talk to your CPA that would be potentially allowable, right? So with a traditional mortgage, when you buy a home, right, you get to write the interest off. If you go over the standard deduction, you can write that off. With a reverse mortgage, you're not making an interest payment typically, right? Right. So you don't necessarily, you're never going to get a 1098 to be able to show that you've paid that interest, even though it's accruing, but you don't get a 1098. There's a little interesting window here of opportunity. Let's say you've got a 401k where you're going to be pulling money out every year, and you're going to pay taxes on that. So one of the unique things you could do is pull a larger amount of money out of that and then make a principal, an interest payment towards your home, because maybe you've been in the home for 5 years, you've allowed it to accrue interest. You will then get a 1098. You can actually potentially cancel out the taxes that you'd pay on that, because you're going to get a 1098 could potentially equal to what you've actually taken from your 401k. Now you wouldn't do it every year because it wouldn't be enough interest to be a benefit. But if you waited for several years and then you have an equity line of credit built into that to go get the cash anyway. So you still get to utilize it tax-free. So there's some really unique things to this. There are a lot more detail that we probably have today to go in that.
I mean, I had no idea. Here's what, first of all, you've been amazing.
Thank you.
And by the way, you've crushed it in time. I mean, you said to me when we were, before we talked about, well, it's only gonna take me 5 minutes. Well, trust me, you just went like 27.
I mean, to talk about recasting.
So there was you've been great. Tell people how they can get a hold of you, please.
Yeah, sure. So again, my office is almost right across the street from you guys, right here on Six Forks Road. But our website is yournclender.com. All my information is there. So www.yournclender.com. My phone number, everything's there, email, all that stuff. Anybody that has any questions about purchasing a home and getting pre-approved or re-qualified, we'd love to help you. One of the things that we do that's a little bit different too is we do a full consultation to really prepare people and help them understand. Usually it's via Zoom for about 45 minutes. A lot of times people will be like, Michael, why do I need to meet with you? I'm already pre-approved with you. There's a lot of detail we're going to go in to help prepare you, especially for the craziness of this market. So be happy to help anyway. Thank you so much for having me, Jay.
That's awesome. His name is Michael Martin. Hey, folks, that's the show. You know what I say to you every week? I know you had a lot of choices. You chose us, and I am grateful for that. You know what? We're going to be back next week. We're going to have another great show. We're going to have another great set of guests. We're going to inform you and educate you when it comes to real estate, because this is Real Estate Right Now, where real estate matters. We talk about real estate matters that matter to you. As I say to you everywhere, all over the world, thank you so much, and ciao, everybody.